producing in many cities a rising tide of discontent that threatens public safety, right? So all of that is to support the same point that, of course, they're discontent. Why? Because look at this institutional structural violence that's occurring. He's not saying this, right? And that's reinforced by the fact that this takes place in every state of the union, right? Okay. Number 11. In a time of domestic crisis, men of goodwill and generosity should be able to unite regardless of party or politics. You can see this idea of unity despite what appears to be, and this is what is genius right here, right? I'm giving away too much. I'm giving away too much. But what JFK does, right? What JFK does, and you have to be able to see this, is he says, this is profoundly genius, right? It's a strategically just a profoundly genius move. African Americans face these discriminations, right? And because of that, and not only do they face these discriminations, which leads them to a worse standard of living, this happens in every state of the Union, right? Throughout the entire United States of America. But what? In a time of crisis, right? Men of goodwill and generosity should be able to unite. Obviously, he's the person of goodwill. Obviously, he's a uniter because he's addressing you on behalf of the community, right? So JFK situates himself conceptually, and I don't want to get into too much rhetorical because this doesn't particularly pertain to what I'm doing, but it's just genius, right? What he does is he becomes the source of uniting sort of the population that he is a representative for, and a population that he wants to acknowledge, right? It's just a strategically genius move. So you can see how it again, linked arguments within our premise cluster. And then finally, really, number 12, it is better to settle these matters in the courts than on the streets, which it's just a great line. I know what's going to happen if you don't. So it's sort of like, if you don't want to take my word for it, we need to do this in the courts, because if not, the discontent that he mentioned in number 10, the discontent is going to spill its way onto the streets, right? So it is better to, so you can, there's undeniable, at least for me, this is my interpretation, 9, 10, 11, and 12 are connected, right? It is better to settle these matters in the courts than on the streets. The new laws are needed at every level, but law alone cannot mend see right. We are confronted primarily with a moral issue, right? And he's absolutely right. I mean, it's just absolutely genius. And what's the conclusion? Number 13, all Americans are to be afforded equal rights and equal opportunity, right? So where we're going is we have 9 plus 10 plus 11 plus 12, and all of, now we take what we said before, right? Number 5 was, it ought to be possible. Remember, ought. This is a moral. This is so good. Sorry. This is so good. This speech is insane. This is the stuff that keeps me doing what I'm doing in the world. This is why I do what I do, right? This is just genius. This speech is out of control. I'm going to say it for myself personally, this is the greatest speech I've ever read. Of any speech, anywhere. It's the greatest speech I've ever read. It's insanely good, right? What does he say at the end? Number 13, right? This is just a segment, but I think it's the juiciest segment, obviously, because I read through the whole thing and picked this paragraph. He says, not in 13, in number 12, he says, we are confronted primarily with a moral issue. And I underlined that, right? On page 11, number 12, we are confronted primarily with a moral issue. And what does he say in 5? It ought. You guys have watched enough ethics. I've talked ad nauseum about the is-ought distinction. You know that ought is an ethical claim. So you know that when he says ought in this passage, he's evoking a moral, ethical responsibility, right? A moral, ethical responsibility which he himself is going to be the first source for uniting. I mean, come on, man. You know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I don't talk about politics on my YouTube channel. Really, I try not to, at least. I mean, you guys know you've seen The Office, so you know what my office looks like. You know I'm pretty left of left. But you know, I don't want to do, because I really shouldn't feed the conspiracy theory stuff, because I absolutely love conspiracy theorists. But it's sort of like, dude, a guy with this type of rhetorical strategy, with this level of mastery, This is not any Mickey Mouse, dog. This is not. This is the highest grade of rhetoric that exists in the universe, right? He is telling you in 12, this is primarily a moral issue. He's going to serve as a uniting force, and then he derives subsequent moral claims, right? Number 5, it ought to be possible, therefore. Number 6, it ought to be possible for Americans. Number 7, it ought to be possible for Americans. Number 8, it ought to be possible, in short. It ought. Based on the foundation. This really sets the foundation. 1 through 4 sets the foundation for, but you can see it's being reproduced, right? This is the idea on a deeper level of pattern recognition, right? If you're doing analytics and sort of like really advanced analysis, you want to identify redundancies, right? Pattern recognition, you recognize that the argument is buttressed heavily on 1 through 4. So if 1 through 4 are weak, this whole thing is going to collapse because all of the weight, like if you were to turn this upside down, all of the weight for the structure, the 13 would be at the pinnacle, right? 13 would be at the pinnacle. All of this arrives, so you can see that it's converging ultimately. The ultimate structure of the argument is the most just bizarrely crafted, amazingly, geniusly crafted converging argument, because he doesn't go necessarily first, second, third, fourth in this sort of formulaic procession of convergence. That's how you initially teach it. The masters don't operate on that level. I mean, you can do first, second, third, fourth, but the ultimate structure of the argument takes a convergence, right? Everything disseminates on this one point. We're all equal, right? Because we've done this, because our nation was built by diverse men, and I forget all the other points, and it was founded in the principle that we're all equal, and all of these things, Now because of all of that, we ought to be doing this, right? We ought to be doing this, we ought to be doing this, we ought to be doing this. And then we get to 12, right, which right before we get to the conclusion, right, right before we get to the conclusion, number 12, we get the final, it's the final thing before the conclusion, right? The final thing is we're confronted with a moral issue. And here it is, I've structured a moral claim, moral claim, moral claim, moral claim, and justified it, justified it, justified it, justified it. Therefore, everything rests on the ultimate conclusion, at least in this section, is all Americans are to be afforded equal rights and equal opportunity. How do you argue against that? How do you argue against that? You gotta come, you can't argue, I mean you can, right? I can't express, I don't have words. I'm out of words. It's absolutely rare that I'm out of words, but I'm out of words. It's art. It's art. It's art. Yeah, I love doing stuff like this, right? This I feel like I'm doing some good in the world. I feel like I'm really, I feel like I'm doing good, right? And it's hopefully this makes sense for you, right? Hopefully it makes sense for you. Hopefully you now see just how amazing. It's overwhelming almost, right? It's overwhelming what we're capable of doing when we put our minds to something. And I hope more than anything that you're inspired now to, maybe tweak the argument yourself, look at it in a different sense, look at a different passage, just look at any argument and try and map it, right? Because now you can sit back and be like, yeah, I really like that format, right? I might not construct a similar argument, but I like this, right? This looks cool. Right? And what I've been able to do is I need a really, really strong foundation, and then I can derive, it doesn't have to be moral claims, but I can derive moral claims, have those claims be linked in a cluster. You could do a divergent here if you wanted to, right? You can do a convergent, you can do many different, so it's just, when it's all said and done, it's just, first of all, it just looks cool. But with respect to his particular speech on civil rights, the fact that he was arguing for civil rights as a white dude, as a president, so poetically, so rhetorically, just well orchestrated, with the logical structure and the sort of conceptual structure that it took, so many different forms of argument. You could see interwoven argumentation here, tons of different variations of argument, interwoven argumentation, right? Combination of serial with a combination of convergence, with a combination of linked argumentation. I mean, it's just beautiful. It's just there's nothing else to say than wow, the guy's a monster, right? Monster speech. I don't have anything else to say. I wish I would just sit here and talk about how much I like this for so long and just want to just continue to look at the damn board. But that is not going to serve good pedagogical devices. So unfortunately, all good things come to an end. I actually really enjoyed doing this segment. I liked section 1 and 2. It was fun. It was great, sort of nerdy. This is passionate, right? This section was just all passion. I hope I was able to convey some of that passion and get you passionate about argumentation analysis and argumentation mapping, and also the idea that be flexible. Don't let anybody tell you what is or isn't the case, right? Interweave these arguments. Come up with your own ideas, right? Analyze the world in your own particular way, because I'm not saying that this is the right way. This is Dr. Campbell's interpretation of the argument. So with that being said, I really want to thank you for taking the time to watch this segment in my critical thinking series. Dr. Jason J. Campbell, have a good day.